Hi, everybody. I'm Jennifer Simmons with AIM, and welcome to week 7 of the 2022 legislative session and our weekly update. Joining me today are Matt Greller, our CEO, Jenna Nepper, our legislative director, and Campbell Ritchie, policy director. Guys, we are really finally getting to the end. I know it's been a short session. Things are moving fast, but it is always that sort of relief as you approach the end. Campbell, exactly where are we in the process?
So thanks, Jennifer. Where we are right now is we're going into this final week of committees. So on Tuesday is the deadline for the House committees, and on Thursday is the deadline for the Senate committees. Thursday is also the second reading deadline for the House, where all amendments have to be final on the floor. And then that following Monday, they'll have their third reading deadline, where they have to pass all the bills out for all the Senate bills out of the House. And similarly, the Senate is just slightly delayed off of that. On Monday, they have their second reading deadline, and on that Tuesday, they have their third reading deadline. Those are the Monday and Tuesday of a week from next week. Just to clarify, next week is when we have the final committees, and then the week following, at the very beginning of the week, is when we have the deadlines for passing the Senate bills out of the House and the House bills out of the Senate.
All right, thanks, Campbell. Let's jump right into the major issue of the legislative session, the issue you've heard so much about, the business personal property tax and the state's effort to partially eliminate the tax. Matt, it's pretty major action at the beginning of the week and a lot to report there.
So thanks, Jennifer. As we've talked before, the main bill that now we're paying the most attention to is House Bill 1002, came over from the House to the Senate, and it was heard in Senate Tax and Fiscal Policy earlier this week. And as you'll recall, it contains the business personal property tax cuts, but it also contains a lot of other tax cut policies that the governor and the House were interested in looking at. That bill was completely stripped. So all the language came out of that bill, and what was reinserted in, I'll get to in just a minute. So this is a good victory for cities and towns and local units of governments and the Replace Donor Raise Coalition, but it's just a small blip, I think, in the overall discussion. And I'll get to that in just a minute. So before I do that, though, what was put back in the bill is Senate Bill 390, which is the food and beverage tax legislation from the first half of session, which would sunset most food and beverage taxes around the state, put a sunset date on them, and require some additional reporting requirements. So that causes concern for us, for those of you that have food and beverage tax, and we'll certainly be working on that. But what it really does is set up a showdown here in the next few weeks as we go into the conference committee process, which is very confusing if you're not living in this world every single day. So after a bill comes out of one house and goes over to the next house, that house can act on it, they can change it, they can remove it, and then the original house of origin has the opportunity to agree to those changes or not. There's some formal process you have to go through, but likely they will dissent on the bill in the House, and that will push this issue to conference committee. And that is the last stage of the legislative process, where members from both the Senate and the House convene in a conference committee setting to negotiate changes to the bill and a final outcome. It's honestly on the big issues like House Bill 1002, it's where all the real work is done. And that's frustrating, I think, for some to understand that the process we've gone through committee hearings and votes on the floor, to realize that you have to go back to this conference committee environment and really work through the changes becomes very challenging. And it's very challenging for us as well, because it's hard sometimes to know when individuals are, are having discussions. It's hard to insert comments or positions to legislators that are working on the issue. So it's a very complex and oftentimes frustrating into the process, but that's the way it's been for a very long time in the Indiana General Assembly, and it's something that we'll work through. So for anybody that tells you that the business personal property tax issue is dead, That is not correct. It is very likely to be negotiated through this conference committee process at the end. So we need you to continue talking to your legislators, particularly your state senators, who have been aligned with local government from the beginning on the business personal property tax issue, and continue to make sure the message is heard that if we do eliminate a portion of the business personal property, that it needs to be replaced fully by a state-supported revenue source. So I think that's where we are today, Jennifer, and I'll turn it back to you.
Yeah, and the only thing I'll add is we're really pleased. Matt mentioned the Replace Don't Erase coalition that we are a part of. We're really pleased with the amount of resolutions that have been coming in, passed by councils, saying exactly what Matt just said, that if any portion of this tax is going to be eliminated, it must be replaced by a sustainable permanent revenue source. And we've been seeing a lot of those resolutions come in. We're up around 25, maybe more at this point. So please keep those coming. There is still time. If you don't have time or the ability to pass a resolution, a letter to your senators or representatives stating the same thing, you can send that to us and we'll put that up on the website as well. And it's aimindiana.org/BPPT.
Hey, Jennifer, can I add just one more thing on this process issue? We've heard from our members already that have been told that the issue is dead by either their state senator or their representative because the language was taken out of the House. And I just want to reiterate that that is not the case. I know I said it once, but I think it's worth saying again that this issue is not going away until the very end of the session. So stay vigilant in your communications with legislators.
Yeah, absolutely. And you can also find news clips on the website I mentioned. If you go into the newsroom, you can see all of the news that's being written about the business personal property tax. So reaching out to your local media, whatever that may be, whether it's a daily paper, a weekly paper, or radio station, reach out to your local media to make sure that they are following this issue as we come down to the closing days of session, and make sure you let them know how you feel about it. So, and let us know if there's anything we can do to help or provide you with any additional information. The next topic up for discussion is TIF, something we cover quite a bit. We've covered quite a bit this legislative session, but this time around, there's some innovative language, innovative bills out there. Still some items of concern, but better than normal regarding TIF.
There have been, I think, 4 TIF bills we've really been monitoring and tracking during the second half of session. So I'll start quickly with 2 of those. So Senate Bill 4, authored by Senator Holdman, deals with what we call the talent TIF and would allow local RDCs to appropriate money and spend money on talent attraction, retainment, and recruitment programs. This bill hasn't been scheduled in House Ways and Means and hasn't been added to the calendar, but some of the provisions from that bill were added to House Bill 1034 and Senate Tax and Fiscal this week. The underlying bill of House Bill 1034 deals with TIF liens, a pretty innocuous bill, but Senator Holdman is very committed to this kind of talent TIF concept and something we fully support. So he did add that to House Bill 1034, and we'll continue to monitor to see how that plays out, whether in conference committee or not. And then House Bill 1246 is a bill dealing with fire protection territories and TIF. This has been assigned to tax and fiscal policy. I haven't seen it on the calendar yet, but as Campbell mentioned, with committee deadlines next week, we'll know if this bill is going to move forward. And then finally, Senate Bill 361 is kind of the major work in progress in terms of TIF related bills. This is the IADC's agency bill. It was heard in House Ways and Means last week, but was held for amendment. As a reminder, I know we've talked about this a lot, but the current version of the bill would allow the IADC to designate an area as an innovation development district, which is essentially a TIF district. So the IADC would capture this new increment, which does include local income and property taxes, along with state income and sales tax. So that money would then be transferred to a fund for the IADC to use for their economic development projects. The intent here from the IADC is to capture those big deals, a lot of discussions about Intel in Ohio. And so AIM members certainly want to be a partner in those major economic development deals and understand the need for those deals to move quickly. But we've been working with members of House Ways and Means and Senator Mishler and Chairman Brown and House fiscal staff to address some of the concerns with the current version of the bill. Really want to reiterate support for a local opt-in process. Again, we understand the need for the speed of the deal, but these deals are going to rely heavily on local government services, including utilities, roads, infrastructure. So I want to clarify that opt-in process. And in the current version of the bill, there are these agreements that are referenced. And right now, the IEDC could give up to 10% of the new increment to the local RDC. We would rather that 10% cap be removed and these agreements be able to be negotiated based on a project by project basis and the services that are going to need to be provided by the municipality and the challenges that come from growth. So that's one provision we'd like to see, and just additional clarification on how any infrastructure is going to be paid for and maintained in the long term, the allowable uses of this new increment. So those types of details need to be fleshed out. And then during the House Ways and Means Committee last week, there was a robust conversation on a need for potential clawback provisions and potentially adding a level of investment threshold. So what type of deal triggers the ability for the IEDC to designate these districts? And so Chairman Brown mentioned maybe it's $250 million, that this deal is so big. And the IEDC countered and said, well, these could be for billion-dollar deals. So I do think, based on our early conversations with Ways and Means, that there could be a level of investment threshold added to the bill. But as Campbell mentioned earlier, the House committee deadline is Tuesday. We do anticipate that this bill will be on the calendar then. So more to come in terms of what the final language out of the House could look like.
Thanks, Jenna. So I'm going to have you keep rolling along here. There's a collection of annexation bills and a collection of eminent domain bills that we are still grappling with this session. Two very serious topics that affect municipal growth and local decision making. So if you don't mind, I'll just have you roll right along with both the annexation and eminent domain.
Absolutely. And I think, in light of the last topic, when we think about these major economic development deals, annexation and eminent domain are two important tools for municipalities. And so starting with annexation, Senate Bill 73 is Senator Boot's bill that would essentially eliminate municipally initiated annexations and the remonstrance process. He's authored this bill since 2015. This was the starting point of those 2015 annexation reforms. It typically passes out of the Senate and doesn't move in the House. This week it was heard in House local government. We do have good news. Chairman Zent did hold the bill in committee. And so I do specifically want to say a big thank you to our members who reached out to Chairman Zent and legislators on that committee, because I do think that ultimately played a role in this bill not moving forward. But we are continuing to monitor two other bills dealing with annexation. House Bill 1110 is for the city of Valparaiso. It's carried by Representative Soliday and Senator Charbonneau. This bill allows Valparaiso essentially to do an annexation of a non-contiguous area with the full support of the neighborhood association. So this bill was on the second reading calendar yesterday. Senator Boots did have an amendment that would have added back in the provisions from Senate Bill 73. That amendment thankfully was not called down, which is good news. The bill was engrossed on second reading. So far 1110 will not be a home for any potential bad annexation bill and language and continues to move out throughout the process. And then finally, Senate Bill 299, as it relates to annexation, is the other bill that's moving. This deals with a situation where there's an annexation and it impacts a fire protection district. This allows that annexation to take in effect 30 days as opposed to January of that following year. Again, a pretty simple bill, but we'll monitor to make sure provisions from 73 aren't added to this bill on second reading on the House, because it did pass out of House local government this week and is still on the second reading calendar. Then eminent domain. This legislative session started out with several bills being introduced on the topic. We're down to one bill that is moving. It's House Bill 1106, which was heard in Senate local government this week. A lot of conversation on committee. in committee this week. The underlying bill would essentially would require county commissioners to approve the use of eminent domain by a municipality outside their corporate boundaries. In committee yesterday, Chairman Buck did add an amendment that would remove this added requirement for municipally owned utilities. We really appreciate that amendment, but we still oppose the underlying bill in light of the 2019 ETJ bill that limited the municipality's ability to utilize eminent domain outside corporate boundaries unless statute expressly authorizes it. So we continue to tell Chairman Buck that this issue was heavily negotiated in 2019. Municipalities really are only using eminent domain outside their corporate boundaries for essential projects, including thoroughfares. So more to come there, but there were 2 additional amendments added to the bill by Senator Buck in committee. One adds back in provisions from Senate Bill 29, which did pass the Senate, but wasn't heard in the House. This is the bill that would require any entity utilizing eminent domain to pay 120% of the fair market value when there's a transfer of title or a total taking. So this impacts several stakeholders, including NDOT, who did testify in opposition to the bill in committee yesterday. And then finally, a totally new concept was added by amendment to 1106. That would be a really major policy shift. It would allow an impacted property owner or someone leasing property to claim compensation for loss of going concern or farm income. This is something Chairman Buck is very passionate about. But as we know, this would add major costs for municipalities exercising eminent domain. But Chairman Buck really feels like these business owners should be compensated if their property is taken. This amendment received a lot of feedback, questions, stakeholder involvement in committee. So ultimately, the bill was held. So we'll continue to work with Chairman Buck to express our concerns about any additional cost is directly paid for by taxpayers. And we'll work with the rest of the Senate Local Government Committee. The plan for now is for Chairman Buck to bring back this bill for an amended vote next week. So more to come, but we'll certainly be reaching out to our members with legislators on that committee to continue to share why we wouldn't like this bill to move forward in the process.
Thanks, Jenna. It's a lot there in those 2 topics. Campbell, let's talk about good news. Several AIM initiatives are moving through the process or have moved through the process already. You want to talk about a few of those?
Yeah. So as you all are possibly aware, but I'll remind you if you're not, every year we go out and solicit feedback from our members to see what sort of changes in the law they'd like to see. And we build those into legislative initiatives that are approved by our legislative committee and our executive committee. And then we try to get bill authors for those and move those throughout the process. And this year we have several of those initiatives that are currently moving through in several different bills. So I'm just going to give you a brief update on a few of those. The first of those, Senate Bill 117 from Senator Kyle Walker. This is an initiative that came from one of our members who had the name of a victim of a crime who was a minor appear in a newspaper because they pulled it off the daily police logs that do not redact the names of minors who are the victims of crimes. And this bill just would say that the police logs would now redact the names of minors who are the victims of crimes in their daily police logs to prevent one of those situations from happening again. And that passed the House this week, and so it is moving forward. It's very likely that we're done with the process on that one. The second initiative is for the cumulative capital development funds. As you may or may not be aware, if you have a cumulative capital development fund and you have a significant change in assessed value, the DLGF can adjust the rate on the cumulative capital development fund for you, and then in order for you to get back to your original rate, you have to go through the entire process to reestablish it. This year in House Bill 1260, the DLGF had an initiative that would eliminate that trending process so that you no longer have to reestablish your CCD funds on an annual basis. That language is still in House Bill 1260, which passed out of the Senate Tax and Fiscal Policy Committee, and no one has any issues with that language. That's been a NAME initiative and an ILMCT initiative for the past few years, and we're happy to see that it's finally looking like it's going to get across the finish line. And the final legislative initiative I wanted to give an update on was the virtual meetings language. As you recall, last year we one of our legislative initiatives was to get a permanent framework for virtual meetings for governing bodies and other boards in Indiana. And there was added in the House during that bill a list of 7 items that, if they were on the agenda, you couldn't participate virtually in that meeting at all. And this year we wanted to get clarifying language that said, well, if one of those 7 items is on the agenda, you can participate in the meeting and vote on any other element, but just not be able to vote on those elements. And we had legislation like that out there, but because of all of the discussions around school boards and virtual meetings with respect to school boards has gotten all of the attention, that language did not manage to move. So we'll have to work on that in future years, possibly when the school board issue is not so hot in the legislature. So those are updates on our legislative initiatives, largely positive. We're getting a lot of those across the finish line.
Yep. Thanks, Campbell. Well, that's a wrap for what I think is probably one of the busiest weeks in committee I've seen for the AIM legislative team in a long time. So we can only recap a few things here in this video. So please read the full legislative summary. Definitely look at the tracking list. There still is a lot going on at the State House in these last few weeks. We encourage you to check your email frequently. We know you get a lot from AIM in terms of our events and our legislative program, but please watch in these last few weeks of the legislative session. This is when those action alerts go out, when we could really use your help on bills as they near the finish line, bills that we either support or oppose. So please keep an eye out for those, particularly in regards to the Replace, Don't Erase initiative. Thanks, and we'll see you back next week.